Interrupt the member, but the time has expired. I call Dave. Excuse me. Excuse me. I call David Clinton, Green MP.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased on behalf of the Greens to stand to support this bill tonight. The bill intending to require lenders to have a reasonable expectations that money lent will be paid back, that the borrowers have the capacity to pay it back, and to prevent excessive rates of interest being charged on those loans. The bill will require lenders to seriously consider the ability of borrowers, prospective borrowers, and that is something one would wish in an even somewhat perfect world that people lending money would do as a matter of course. But sadly we know this is not the case. Even lenders who are operating more or less within the law are able to excessively charge their customers, get people into extraordinarily poor financial positions. Credit and the access to debt seems to be something of a national disease. Even quite legitimate lenders in recent times have been guilty of encouraging and actively selling debt. I recently spoke to a banker, a fellow, the first of 3 generations of bankers in his family. The grandfather, the first of the generation, in his day, to borrow money was a serious matter, and banks required significant references, credentials, a very close examination before they would lend money. The son operated in a somewhat looser environment, and the grandfather, horrified to discover his granddaughter, also a banker, was being actively encouraged and rewarded for selling debt to people, selling credit cards, selling loans. And that is a reflection of our culture. And of course these loan sharks that this bill endeavours to drive out, or at least to put some controls on, are the extreme reflection of that culture. People, why do they engage with these people? Clearly, why do borrowers engage with these clearly unscrupulous and cheating loan lenders? Clearly, to some extent, naivety, lack of financial literacy, sometimes just sheer desperation, needing money to repair a car, to make a car warrantable, to enable people to get to work, to pay bills, to repair appliances so that a family might continue to function. Cultural demands for travel or to meet family obligations, weddings, funerals, whatever it might be. Temptation to purchase toys, be they cars, large televisions, expensive telephones, driven by the relentless consumer advertising that we are all constantly exposed to, and often the least well off, the most vulnerable, are most vulnerable to. There is a very wide and diverse range of organisations who have spoken out in support of this proposal, of this bill, including the New Zealand Federation of Family Budgeting Services, who say that 30,000 new client families walk through their doors around the country every year, many of them hopelessly indebted to loan sharks, who are in the business of making money off these vulnerable people, these vulnerable communities, and deliberately target these groups with their store locations and presentations. So I currently live in Avondale, which is a low decile suburb, if you could describe it that way, and can, just off the top of my head, think of 4 or 5 outlets in the main street of Avondale where one can walk in and just about be guaranteed of walking out with often quite substantial sums of money with very little reference to one's ability to repay that money. FinSec, the Bank Workers Union, have come out in support of this legislation and have, as has been pointed out, have noted that the Prime Minister has criticised 22% rates of charging on credit cards, which scarcely is that hardly compares with the rates that are being charged by the worst of these loan sharks. The point's already made that we're actually out of step, and it is made again by FinSec that we are seriously out of step internationally with other developed countries. Restrictions apply in Japan, many countries in Europe and South America, even Africa. Caps are being implemented or proposed in most of Australia, Canada, the USA and the UK, while we seem to struggle with the very notion of applying these limits, these controls on these unscrupulous lenders. I'd like to quote from a speech made to a similar topic. Quote, "Firstly, and probably most significantly, the Green Party believes there should actually be a named and fixed limit on interest rate charges. Many low-income people in South Auckland and elsewhere are defaulting on loans which have exceptionally high finance rates, and these loans have been made by moneylenders who are aware that it would be just about impossible for the borrower to meet the repayments. I was quoting there from a speech made in 2003 by Sue Bradford in this House at the time when what was then called the Consumer Credit Bill was introduced to this House. 7 years ago, the Greens and Sue Bradford were advocating for exactly the sort of mechanism that now is again endeavoured to bring back to this House.
I regret to advise the member that his time has expired. I call to order